What is inflation? Understanding why prices rise, what causes it and who it hurts most. In May 2022, inflation unexpectedly reached a new 40-year high, as gas, food and rent prices rose. This was the largest rise since December 1981, according to the Labor Department. Further, if doing so could send the economy even closer to a recession, the Federal Reserve is seeking to reduce it by aggressively raising interest rates. However, as costs rise, many Americans are finding it more difficult to make ends meet. While it is simple to observe and quantify these price fluctuations, it is more difficult to truly comprehend them. Inflation affects employment and wages among other factors besides expenses. So, what is inflation, and what causes it? Josh Bivens, the director of research at the Economic Policy Institute, a left-leaning think tank with headquarters in Washington, D.C., defined inflation as a generalized rise in prices. For instance, inflation may have an effect on prices for items like petrol, rent, or food. However, he said, really, inflation merely refers to all commodities and services collectively growing in price by some common amount. What causes inflation? Several things can create inflation. A macroeconomic excessive spending over the economy's relative ability to generate goods and services is the most typical, according to Bivens. As more individuals spend money on products or services that are in short supply to fulfill demand, producers start to hike prices. According to Bivens, if everyone in the economy resolved tomorrow to spend every last dollar of their salaries without saving a penny, they would all rush to the stores to try to make purchases. However, producers haven't generated enough to support that significant increase in overall spending. As a result, prices would increase. The scarcity of manufacturers is another factor causing inflation. According to Bivens, prices would rise if there are insufficient workers to manufacture the in-demand commodity or service. He said, labor is the main component of cost of manufacturing anything. Additionally, there is a degree of built-in inflation in which economic systems attempt to maintain a constant inflation rate. The Federal Reserve System's goal inflation rate in the U.S. is 2%. This means that companies can raise prices by 2% a year and the market will still be dynamic. To ensure that they can continue to afford products and services, workers can additionally request a 2% wage rise based on these increases. According to Bivens, that 2% is kind of the built-in inflation, what everyone expects to happen. Is inflation good or bad? According to Bivens, inflation can be both good and terrible. Today's inflation, in 2022, is quite terrible. It is too much. That's too quick, said he. He noted that inflation rates might be advantageous if they are stable, positive, and modest. According to Bivens, inflation is kind of lubricating the labor market's gears. The economy just seems to function better that way, the author says. It is a way to undertake some modifications without actually having to lower nominal wages. However, if inflation exceeds the desired rate, it may lead to market anxiety. You don't want to go very far above whatever your aim is. People should be able to plan ahead and anticipate how prices and salaries will change over the coming year, Bivens remarked. Who is hurt by inflation? Inflation can have a detrimental effect on whoever spends the most money on products or services. For instance, low and moderate income households suffer when gas or food prices rise since these expenses make up a larger portion of their overall income, according to Bivens. Will inflation cause a recession? According to Bivens, the two are closely related. A significant increase in the jobless rate would significantly reduce inflation, he said. Inflationary pressures tend to ease as the economy weakens. Negative GDP growth, or even 2 negative quarters, are not sufficient to define a recession. It is instead a sharp reduction in economic activity brought on by a number of reasons, such as rising unemployment, a slowdown in the production and sale of goods, and falling wages in addition to negative GDP readings. That is in accordance with the National Bureau of Economic Research, which makes the final determination about the beginning and end of a U.S. recession. So, while a recession may result from inflation, it is not a given. Are food prices going to keep going up? Prices for groceries increased by 0.7% from August and have increased by 13% since last year. Through January, Barclays anticipates double-digit annual food inflation. The price of rice increased 13.6% from a year earlier and 1% from the previous month in September. The price of cakes, cupcakes, and cookies increased 1.8% during the past year. 1.8% and 6.7% more pork was sold than a year before. Some food costs did, however, decrease. Eggs decreased 3.5% while uncooked ground beef decreased 2%, although both are still up 30.5% year. How inflation affects rent costs can increase as a result of inflation. much like other parts of the economy. In response to an earlier increase in home prices, landlords increased rent by 7.2% annually and 0.8% monthly. For a third month in a row, gas prices have dropped significantly due to concerns about the recession and declining oil consumption worldwide. Pump prices dropped by 4.9% but were still up 18.2% on an annual basis and had risen in recent weeks after OPEC proposed a reduction in oil supply. Many Americans have little experience saving, spending, budgeting, and investing in such a high inflation environment. If you want to know how the experts recommend prioritizing your finances in the months ahead, watch the next video on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and push the button like if you enjoy my video.